Another switchback. Wait, this isn't the top. Where's the summit? Why am I doing this?
At REI Co-op, we believe there are places within ourselves
Almost there. You got this.
that we find only outside.
Wow. This is worth it.
We have the gear, inspiration, and advice to help you get there. REI Co-op. Visit rei.com.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome to the Roger Stone Show. Earlier this week, New York City Councilman Zohran Mamdani, a far-left Muslim socialist, won the city's Democrat primary for mayor and is now the presumptive frontrunner to win that position, a move that some fear is a glimpse into the future for American politics under the nation's current demographic slide into multiculturalism. The former rapper has quite a platform. He plans to target, his words, whiter neighborhoods with higher taxes, and actually says billionaires shouldn't exist. Mamdani doubled down later in the week with his plan to jack up property taxes on richer and whiter neighborhoods, and also asserted that billionaires, again, should not exist. Mamdani claimed that his Soak the Rich proposal was not driven by race, despite his campaign platform explicitly targeting white homeowners. That is just a description of what we see right now. It's not driven by race, he said. It's more of an assessment of what neighborhoods are being undertaxed versus overtaxed. Actually, his nakedly communist policies would bankrupt New York City while targeting all residents, not just white residents. A housing policy document posted to Mamdani's official website states that if he were elected, his administration would shift the tax burden from overtaxed homeowners in the outer boroughs to more expensive homes in richer and whiter neighborhoods. Mamdani's website also states that his plan would effectively lower tax payments for homeowners in neighborhoods like Jamaica and Brownsville while raising the amount paid in the more expensive Brooklyn brownstones. Department of Justice Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Harmeet Dillon threatened to investigate Zohran Mamdani over his illegal racist proposals to tax white Americans more as New York City mayor. Racial discrimination is illegal in the United States, period. Full stop, she said. The illegal discriminatory scheme described by Mamdani would violate federal constitutional and statutory norms. Here's some more of this guy's far-out communist platform. Banning fossil fuels. Mamdani views climate action as integral to social justice and opposes the expansion of gas-fired power plants, for example, in Astoria. Coal-fired pizza ovens? Forget about it. He supports the All-Electric Buildings Act to prohibit fossil fuel equipment in new buildings. He also supports taxing drivers a fee just for driving through Manhattan. Then, of course, there is the rent freeze. Mamdani intends to mandate a rent freeze for 2.4 million rent-stabilized apartments, a policy that would cost property owners almost $7 billion over 4 years. The rent freeze would make it difficult for landlords to maintain their properties and would discourage investments since no one wants to invest in an asset with frozen revenues. Rent control policies like these violate basic principles of market efficiency and have failed wherever implemented, leading to housing shortages, reduced new construction, and deterioration of existing units due to limited maintenance incentives. And of course, there is his plan for free child care. Mamdani promises free universal child care for children aged 6 weeks to 5 years, approximately 450,000 children. The program is estimated to cost anywhere from $5 billion to $13 billion a year. Across the board, of course, he favors increased taxes, not just to pay for free child care and his other promised massive big government handouts. He's proposed raising taxes, including a 2% income tax on individuals earning more than $1 million annually, and raising the corporate tax rate from 7.25 to 11.5%, which he claims would generate up to $10 billion in revenue. Rather than raising government tax collections, Mamdami's tax would end up driving the most productive New Yorkers out of the city. Bill Ackman, a billionaire, founder and CEO of Pershing Square Capital Management, suggested that wealthy taxpayers will simply flee. And he wrote, New York City under Mamdami is about to become much more dangerous and economically unviable. Then there is, of course, his low-cost housing expansion. He's called for the construction of 200,000 new low-cost housing units, which would cost another $3 to $5 billion and actually end up creating more slums. Then, of course, there is his outrageous proposal for city-owned grocery stores. He proposes that the city operate 5 grocery stores, 1 per borough, to lower food prices, drawing inspiration from similar initiatives in Chicago. This is seen as some kind of bold intervention into the market economy. Other places, it's known as what it is, communism. Then, of course, he wants a $30 minimum wage. Mamdami wants to raise New York City's minimum wage to $30 per hour. This would destroy virtually all small businesses and cost the city another $1 billion in employment contracts. Then on his list is free college. He wants to make CUNY and SUNY tuition free. That would cost another $3 to $4 billion. Free public transport. He also wants to make city buses free and rack up another $1 billion in expenses for the city, while inevitably leading to increased crime on the bus. Of course, then there's probably his most dangerous idea, defunding the police. Mamdani has previously expressed support for defunding the police and releasing all of those currently incarcerated, saying that violence is just a perception. This is a proposition that would render a city which is already extremely dangerous completely unsafe. Let's be very clear. He's also been a pro-Palestinian advocate. Mamdami pledges to enforce international criminal court arrest warrants against Israeli leaders, such as Benjamin Netanyahu, if they visit New York City, in direct opposition to the federal government. Of course, Netanyahu is planning to attend a UN session in the very near future. Conservative commentator John Podhoretz called Mamdami and his plan to globalize the Intifada an outrage. Mamdami's own Facebook profile features a video of him standing with members of Within Our Lifetime, a radical group that supports terrorism, holding signs that says there is only one solution: Intifada revolution. The government-owned grocery stores he wants to set up would supposedly sell food well below the market prices paid for with your tax dollars. This could be his most outrageous proposal of them all. In fact, John Catsimatidis, the CEO of the grocery chain Gristedes, one of the largest in the city, declared that if New York City is going socialist, I will definitely close or sell or move or franchise the Gristedes locations. Can Mamdami win? We'll come back to that on the other side. This is no longer a contest between Republicans and Democrats or even liberal and conservatives. I think this is a contest between those who are literally insane and those who have common sense. And whether the former mayor, Eric Adams, the Republican nominee, Curtis Sliwa, or former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's filed as independent, split the sane vote, well, that remains to be seen. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show, and we'll pick it up on the other side to find out whether New York City is going to be the first city in the country to elect an openly communist mayor.
This is The Roger Stone Show. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back on the Roger Stone Show. We're talking about the Democrat candidate for mayor, Zoran Mamdani, and his rise. Overall, Mamdani is proposing what economists have called a war on prices, a plan that would devastate New York's economy through government takeovers of housing, retail, and labor markets. Now, history shows that every communist country attempting similar policies eventually limits access to government stands only to those who qualify, usually the poor, while the rest of the population pays for services they're not allowed to use. The only exception of that, of course, is high-ranking parties. To prevent black market reselling or hoarding, the government would also have to restrict how much food each person could buy. Depending on how far Mamdani pushes this insanity, we could even see tip lines to report neighbors reselling goods, or maybe even turning in people who gained weight since they're clearly consuming more than their fair share. The likelihood of a four-way race is one of potential chaos. Let's be very clear that Democrat Mamdani's chances are strengthened by the fact that he has an army of passionate supporters who will work to get out the vote for him in November. And he ran a very savvy, modern, internet-based campaign. This is, of course, the worst case for New York City, which was damaged perhaps more than any other city in the U.S. in the wake of the COVID crisis and still has to fully recover. Mamdani's radical redistributionist policies will deliver the final death blow to Big Apple, as middle class and even the wealthy, as well as businesses, will be scurrying to find greener pastures. Political insiders are asking themselves, how could this have happened? How could someone with such a radical disposition, someone whose previous experience is largely that of a rapper, have won so many votes? It certainly speaks, in my opinion, to the Democrat Party's leftward lurch, but that fact belies the true story of his success. In fact, I think that Mamdani succeeded because he, in the mirror image of President Donald Trump, ran against a corrupt, cronyist system that is reviled by the people, positioning himself brilliantly as an outsider and a bold reformer. It is amazing to watch the way he toned down his radicalism on the campaign trail, presenting himself more as a common-sense progressive rather than the Marxist ideologue that he is. This was a cynical move to shroud his true intentions. Make no mistake about it, Mamdani's policies are dangerously anti-American. He wants to abandon immigration enforcement in the city, hike taxes on the wealthy, institute rent controls, subsidize housing and health care, create a hate crime task force to police free speech, and use the government to nationalize grocery stores, at the same time opening Rikers Island and letting everyone escape. The rise of Mamdaniism is a signal the populist left is on the rise. Senator Bernie Sanders, that windbag, who skimmed millions of dollars from his two presidential campaigns and calling them media placement fees, and is therefore himself today a millionaire, doing that without the knowledge of his donors, which I point is not illegal, but it is certainly hypocritical. He's clearly winding down, although the old windbag is out there on the hustings. A greater example would be Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who may be a punchline nationally, but there's a generation of socialist politicians who are rising in the shadows of Bernie Sanders. Some of these politicians, like Mamdani, will be savvy and formidable. They will be adept at co-opting populist rhetoric to enact their actually extreme agenda. If Republicans or those with common sense do not double down and realize this threat, we will lose the country to these demagogues. As to the future of this race, again, as I pointed out, it is highly potential at this point that we could have a three-way split that would appeal to voters of common sense. Republicans have nominated Curtis Sliwa, nominated without a primary, has not been allowed to obtain or spend his campaign matching funds yet. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo, sources tell me that he has not yet made a final decision as to whether he will remain on the ballot as an independent. And then, of course, there is Eric Adams. Those who are claiming that Eric Adams was prosecuted because he was a critic of Joe Biden's open border policies are not telling you the truth. He was a full-throated supporter of New York City being a sanctuary city. His only complaint with Joe Biden was that Biden did not give him the billions that he needed to solve the problem that Biden created. The idea that he is somehow a born-again reformer does not speak to the crimes for which he was not prosecuted, but those are the ones that we're aware of. In that scandal, he was accused of taking $100,000 from Turkish interests. That's illegal. Laundering it through New York City residents and submitting it to the city's 8-to-1 campaign matching fund program. I believe there are 3 other sealed indictments against Mayor Adams, sealed because of reasons of quote-unquote national security. I suspect that means that there's even more foreign cash involved. How this folds out remains to be seen, but we'll be on top of it right here on The Roger Stone Show. Coming up, Larry Schnapp, one of the leading JFK researchers in the country, will tell us what's missing from President Donald Trump's order that all documents and information be released by the National Archives regarding the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So whatever you do, folks, stay right here with us on The Roger Stone Show. Please don't touch that dial because we'll be right back.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to The Roger Stone Show. Former aide to President and Vice President Lyndon Johnson, Bill Moyers, died this week at age 91. Moyers played an important role in the assassination of President John F. Kennedy because it was Vice Presidential aide Bill Moyers who gave the order to the Secret Service to remove the plastic bubble top because Moyers was a pastor. Those sound to me like the words of his boss, Lyndon Johnson. There is some misunderstanding. Descriptions of the removable bubble top following the assassination could give the erroneous impression that it resembled a clear plastic bubble, which was not bulletproof, but did not pose any impediment to an assassination's bullet. In fact, the top was more box-shaped and, aside from the side windows and a small decorative rear window, was covered in black vinyl, which would have made it impossible for a sniper to get a clear headshot at President John F. Kennedy. It was Moyers, the vice presidential aide to Johnson, who gave the order. I have this from two retired Secret Service agents who were there. Moyers would go on to play a vital role in the assassination, obviously, would later use his considerable connections to kill a British-based television program called The Guilty Men that was supposed to air on the History Channel in November of 2003. The problem with this series was it postulated that Johnson was a major player in the assassination. It was Bill Moyers who enlisted the help of ex-presidents Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter, as well as first Johnson's widow, Lady Bird Johnson, to move against the History Channel and get them to withdraw the movie. Even the New York Times commented, Bruce Weber of the New York Times said at the time that it was very odd, not the least of which was because people involved, all who have seemed to have brought a great deal of thunder to bear on a controversy that probably would have disappeared of its own accord. But it's important, Mr. Moyers said, to put the public record straight. No, I'm afraid Bill Moyers went to his death knowing who really killed President John F. Kennedy. Joining me now to talk about that is Larry Schnapp. Larry Schnapp is an attorney who has been researching the assassination of President John F. Kennedy since the late 1960s. He is one of those who offered one of the earliest critiques of the Warren Commission's conclusions. He took a leading role in arranging a prominent mock trial for the accused assassination Lee Harvey Oswald in 2017 under the umbrella of Citizens Against Political Assassinations. And he has filed multiple lawsuits against the National Archives and the Biden administration to compel the United States government to release the remaining JFK assassination records. He's a frequent commenter on all of these topics, and we are honored to have him with us today. Larry, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hi, Roger. Thanks for having me.
So from the very beginning, I want to admit that you have really been an avatar of what needs to be released, and I think the most accurate critic of the releases so far. I think you and I would agree that Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna has done an extraordinary job of trying to ferret out the truth, particularly when the fact that she came to this job without a significant background in JFK research. And the orders, the first that I know to point out, the orders as issued to the National Archives by President Trump were really not broad enough. And they therefore allowed some in the deep state to hide some of the most crucial material. Tell us about that.
So, first of all, I agree with you 100% about Congresswoman Luna. You know, if Earl Warren had her dedication to the truth, we wouldn't be here. And she is a real fireball. And, you know, I have friends that go into her office, and when they talk about a document, she calls up the NARA or she calls up someone at the CIA and says, where is this document? So there are lots of people in the JFK research community who, honestly, you know, they tend to be Democrats, and they kind of they just attack her because she's a Republican, and you can see from the way the Democrats responded on the two hearings so far that they're not interested in the truth, and it's remarkable. But so the president's executive order should be construed to have required all of the records pertaining to the assassination that are in the possession of the federal government to have been released. And that's not the way the CIA is interpreting that order. and I'm really going to have to get Radcliffe or perhaps the DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, Tulsi Gabbard's been doing a great job, but the CIA is apparently still, resisting releasing documents, and either Luna's going to have to, I'm really concerned that they're destroying records, and if Luna finds out that records have been destroyed, the next thing that should be done is that Congress has to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate the government's performance with these records.
One of them, I agree with you completely. The other alternative, of course, is a criminal referral to the Department of Justice, but they seem to be a bit backed up there. I like the idea of a special.
Hands are full right now.
Yes, to say the least. One of the most controversial areas, there's several we'll talk about, have been the so-called Joanides records. Joanides was a CIA operative. He was really kind of represented the CIA during the House Select Committee on Assassinations investigation, which the CIA essentially stonewalled, turning over no documents and providing no testimony. The initial documents turned over regarding Joanides were described to me as innocuous. Now we hear that additional documents turned over show that he was running an illegal off-the-books operation involving Lee Harvey Oswald, who, of course, the CIA told us they had no previous knowledge of, as well as recruiting assassinators to try to kill Fidel Castro. What do you think of this?
Yeah, so we know that Joanides definitely, his responsibility during the HSCA days was to stonewall the committee, and the CIA's mission ever since Angleton in '64 was to run the clock out. So he definitely interfered with the HSCA. In fact, he took advantage of Blakey, who was the head of the committee, his naivety about the CIA. He didn't conceive the CIA could be, not being up above board with him. And then even Judge Tunheim, at the last press hearing, mentioned that when they sought Joanides' files. Now, remember, Joanides was running the DRE, and the DRE is the one that was a Cuban exile group. They're the ones that almost immediately after Oswald's name got released on the day of the assassination started dropping stuff about Oswald's all his activities. So this was in the queue. So this group was the key group, and they were ahead of everybody on giving a biography on Oswald to paint him as a Castro supporter. But Joanides, the CIA told Joanides, the ARB, the review board, that the only files they had were personnel files, and they showed 44 pages or so, roughly around. And then the ARB said, okay, this is representative of those files. We're not interested in the rest of them. Well, now we learned that there was operational files that are missing from the very time of 1963 when Joanides was running the DRE. And that's what we're trying to get. And the word we got last week through Representative Luna is that the CIA is saying, well, we may consider releasing these on a case-by-case basis. That's not what the president's order says. They're supposed to release all of the records related to the assassination. And I can't think of any more records that could be related to the assassination than the Joanides operational files of his supervision of the DRE. That was the group that was interacting with Oswald in the summer of '63. They're the ones that got into the fight with Oswald in New Orleans. And so this is, for those of us who think that the conspiracy may have originated out of New Orleans, at least the operational phase, or this is an important area, and Garrison completely overlooked this area. So
I'm going to have to stop you there. We're going to be right back with more of Larry Schnapf in just a minute. We're going to take this quick commercial break.
Now it's time for Protecting Your Future, sponsored by Colonial Metals Group. Here's Roger Stone.
In these turbulent economic times, with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell stoutly refusing to cut interest rates despite the fact that we have record low inflation. With the Federal Reserve printing money like it's going out of style, with Congress refusing to codify the cuts in waste, fraud, and abuse uncovered by Elon Musk, now is the time to protect your future. Now is the time to protect your retirement, and you can do so with the strength and durability of gold. You can convert all or part of your cash savings or your IRA or your 401k to gold, and you can do so tax-free. Gold has stood the test of time, and the people who do it are the folks at the Colonial Metals Group. So go to colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone. That's colonialmetalsgroup.com/stone, or go to freegoldguide.com and learn all about it. You'll be glad you did.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
AI is moving fast. So fast, it's hard to keep up. In fact, in ServiceNow's latest AI Maturity Index, scores dipped 20% from last year. But that's okay, because AI isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. You may be behind today, but tomorrow you could be a pace setter. Dive into ServiceNow's AI Maturity Index and see how you can innovate as fast as your ambitions. Visit servicenow.com/AI maturity.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back with attorney Larry Schnapp, who, to my mind, is literally one of the most knowledgeable people in the country about the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and who has been a leading critic of the Warren Commission conclusions, as well as, I think, a critic of the way the government has responded to the order by President Donald Trump to release all the documents pertaining to the Kennedy assassination. Larry, I want to focus on two areas now. One of them is the role of organized crime. The House Select Committee in the late 70s, after an exhaustive investigation in which virtually every staffer had previous experience in investigating organized crime. One reason why I don't think they looked long or hard enough at the CIA, but they did conclude in their report that organized crime played a significant role in Kennedy's murder. Yet, to my knowledge, none of the documents that have been released to date pertain to the role of Carlos Marcello and others in organized crime. Is that correct?
So the most important documents we're waiting for are tapes that Carlos Marcello had while he was in jail in what is known as the Camtech sting operation in the mid-1980s. He had befriended a person that became an FBI undercover agent called Jack Van Langingham, and they have hundreds of hours of recordings that have been sealed. Now, Jack Van Langingham came out and said that Carlos Marcello told him, that he had helped organize the assassination, that he knew Oswald, that David Ferrie had introduced Oswald to him, and that Jack Ruby was basically that he set up Jack Ruby in in Dallas, and that he essentially was running his bar, and that the Dallas police were all on the take. Jack Van Langingham also, so he sent some memos as well to the San Francisco office of the FBI, and when he apparently had cut a deal, and he was concerned that the FBI wasn't following through on their part of the deal. We need to have these records unsealed, and so the Department of Justice is actually the party that needs to do this. And I have asked in a letter to Pam Bondi to arrange to have these tapes unsealed, because we have to hear what Carlos Marcello actually said. I don't think the mafia could have been in a position to alter the autopsy, but I think Carlos Marcello probably helped pay for the operation, which probably was conceived at the operational level. And we also know that Carlos Marcello, his bagman for LBJ was this guy Jack Halfin, I think is his name.
Halfer, yes.
So there could be a connection between LBJ and Marcello. So there was one set of documents that were produced last month about Marcello, but they were limited to the efforts that the government was doing to try to prosecute him for lying about his his birth certificate. And it was all about their effort to investigate, in Guatemala, and it really didn't pertain. There really wasn't anything there. The one interesting thing that came out of that, though, was that apparently Jim Garrison had requested that files that were taken by the FBI the weekend that Ferry was killed or died, he wanted them back. They had been seized, and I didn't realize that he had asked for those. So that's the other thing that Pam Bondi can do is we have to get the Walter Sheridan files, because those are the files. Walter Sheridan was a right-hand man of Bobby Kennedy. He did his own investigation. Those records were put into the JFK library, and then when the ARB asked for them, they were sent to NBC. And Walter Sheridan claimed that he did this as part of an NBC investigation on Garrison. So the Marcello tapes are really important. We have to get them released, and we're pressing for that. And the Walter Sheridan from the Department of Justice. And also, I think NBC has some films of the day of the assassination, the Darnell film and the Wegman film, that could possibly be exculpatory for Oswald. I don't know if they are, but they could be, and we want them to be 3D animated. To have them evaluated so that we can determine that. I have some forensic evidence I would like them to study. I don't know if we have time for that, but in the late 90s, someone discovered that there was organic material on the bullet fragments that were found in the limo, and we determined that they were human. And then the next step was to determine whose tissue is that, and is it John Connally or is it President Kennedy? Because if it's John Connally, then that demolishes the single bullet theory. And we'd like to get some DNA tests done using modern technology, and I'd like to get some 3D analysis done on the bullets, all the bullets, and the rifle, because in 1978, when the HSCA fired the rifle, the bullets in 1978 did not match the bullets from 1964. They claimed it was because the rifle had changed over the years, but subsequently we have learned that rifling does not change even if you fire a rifle 1,000 times. So there's something fishy about why the bullets in 1978 did not match the bullets in 1964. These are the kind of things that we'd really love to have Luna. I know she doesn't have the authorization, this is the funding, but maybe the Department of Justice can do this. By the way, we understand that her task force was supposed to expire at the end of the month, and we have heard through the grapevine that it's been extended another 6 months.
That is also my understanding as well. When we refer to Carlos Marcello, for those who don't know, he was the mobster who dominated the mob in both Texas and Louisiana. And when Larry speaks to the ARB, he's speaking of the Assassinations Review Board. You can see why we had him join us today. He has raised a number of significant questions, particularly that of the NBC film. As my understanding, NBC is trying to overload Luna with extraneous film, but I think she will get to the bottom. I want to thank our guest, Larry Schnapf, one of the country's leading experts on the Kennedy assassination, for joining us today, and we'll have him back as things develop. Larry, thanks for joining us.
Thanks a lot, Roger. Good luck and have a good day.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
On July 2nd, Sean Diddy Combs was only found guilty of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, the Mann Act, related to his former girlfriend, Casey Ventura, and another woman known as Jane. Each count carries a maximum sentence of 10 years, though sentencing guidelines suggest a range of 4 to 5 years, with Combs already having served about 9 months behind bars. He was acquitted on the more serious charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and 2 counts of sex trafficking, which could have led to life imprisonment. The trial, which lasted nearly 2 months, revealed allegations of a criminal enterprise involving coerced sex acts, drugs, and violence, although Combs' defense argued that all those acts were consensual. The judge in the case has denied bail, citing Combs' potential danger, and proposed sentencing is now set for October 3rd of 2025. Combs will now face additional civil suits, which have a lower burden of proof. Here to help us break this shocking development down is Jaco Booyens. He is a recognized leader in the fight against sex trafficking. In President Trump's first term, he served as an advisor to the Trump White House's Anti-Trafficking Council. He also advises several nations and organizations combating human trafficking. His efforts are universally recognized, and we are very, very proud to have him on the show. Jaco, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, what a pleasure, and thank you for your voice in our nation. It's an honor to be with you today.
So I must tell you, having followed the Jeffrey Epstein case, I was one of the first people in the country to write about Epstein. If you go to my book, The Clintons' War on Women, that was published in 2015, the longest chapter in the book is about Jeffrey Epstein and his criminal enterprises. I detail there how the police chief in Palm Beach gave state prosecutors a airtight case for sex trafficking and statutory rape of 33 individual underage victims, yet he got a slap on the wrist, and then only years later would he be charged federally. I also followed the Ghislaine Maxwell trial very carefully. I'm still astounded how you can be involved in conspiracy, but no other conspirators are named. And now this. What are we to make of all of this?
Yeah, Roger, I followed your work through those trials, and we too were involved with every one of them since 2005 on Epstein. This year marks the 31st year for me to combat trafficking, and it's important to note because my sister Ilonka was trafficked when she was 12 in 1994 through a U.S. record label in the music business. Within human trafficking, Diddy's case is very particular to our family because we know how this crime is perpetrated. This case was built as a house of straw. It was built wrong from the get-go. From when the claims were made until the case was filed, we looked at this case and we said, this will fall apart in trial. Is they're building a case on one key witness testimony, Casey Ventura, who, in my opinion, was coerced, was defrauded, and was trafficked. But you go build a case against massive powerhouses of people, Hollywood elites, executives, people from Wall Street that attend these parties, and you're going to hang that whole case on a single survivor's testimony. Not only that, look at who the prosecutor is in the case. The prosecution did an absolute dismal job in this case. They don't know how to deal with survivors. They don't understand the type of trauma that survivors go through. So these cases have holes in it like Swiss cheese. And in defense, all they need to do, like they did with Virginia Giuffre in the Epstein case, is with Virginia, they asked Virginia if she'd ever lied before. When she said, sure, I mean, who hasn't? And they go, she's not a credible witness. With Cassie this time, and we saw it coming, they said, well, was your acts with Diddy ever consensual? Ever? And of course it was at some point. She was in love with the man. But if you understand how predators work, how traffickers work, what force, fraud, and coercion actually does to the exploitation of a person, how they earn the victim's trust, how they manipulate them with power and with status and appeal. Of course, at some point, it was consensual. But then she also says, but I didn't consent to X, Y, Z. I didn't consent to getting drugged. I didn't consent to waking up and having had sex with men that I didn't know. I didn't consent to having to sleep with men in order to record a record or for you to sing 16 bars on my record. I didn't consent to that. So these cases are very seldomly, Roger, built right because the people who built them do not know the crime. We have. Do you know, Roger, that we prosecute sex crimes in our country, which is these are felonies, right? We prosecute it at the state level as a low a rate as 13%, where the charge is a felony and the verdict is a felony for what it was charged, human trafficking, as low as 13%. All other crimes that are felonies, the charges match the claims at 92%. We do a dismal job at prosecuting sex crimes in this country, particularly when elites are involved.
Let me play devil's advocate here, if I may. The prosecutor in question, of course, was Maureen Ryan Comey. She is the daughter of former FBI Director James Comey, a man who just this past week was proven to have conspired with others in the greatest single dirty trick in American political history and an abuse of power in which the full authority of the United States government, plus the incredible capabilities of our intelligence committees, utilized two pieces of quote-unquote evidence that they knew to be fabricated, the Steele dossier and the false claim that the Democrat National Committee had been the victim of an online hack by Russian intelligence to try to remove a legitimately duly elected president of the United States. So at a minimum, Maureen Comey is an establishmentarian. She's certainly representative of the established order. Given the stature of many of those involved in the Epstein scandal, those involved in the Diddy scandal, perhaps the government does understand how to build these cases, but they're throwing the cases to protect those who Epstein was catering to, that Diddy was catering to. I think that's a very likely possibility. What do you think?
Very good point, Roger. Yes. And to play devil's advocate that way, you would say, but think of the nefarious nature of that, where the American citizen is going to lose because the end justifies the means. And I would say that's most likely what happened here. Why are all these cases taken to New York? Maxwell wasn't arrested in New York. They're taken to New York. You find a certain amount of prosecutors with a certain history, a history that's riddled with what seems to be corruption, right, to prosecute these cases. And you make a really good point that it is nefarious in nature and even building the case, because you would never, if you were building this case correctly to actually prosecute the crime, you would subpoena co-conspirators, because RICO is what RICO charged. So racketeering, conspiracy was the charges. So then you would go subpoena other people that went to the freak-off parties. You would go subpoena the record label executives that paid for the parties. 22 years ago, when Sean couldn't pay for the parties, you would subpoena them. You would bring them in to testify. You would cross-examine them. You would go get other witnesses in the industry. None of that happened. They never prosecuted this case to actually find Sean Combs. I refuse to call him Diddy. His name is Sean Combs. To find Sean guilty on what he was charged for. Because if they were to do it, Roger, cookie would crumble. They would have to go call some serious names. You would have to go call a prince in the Epstein case. You would have to go call a former president of the United States to come testify. You would have to go call some high-ranking individuals in Hollywood. And the American citizen that's not a celebrity loses every time. And so this is how the left plays. I want us to understand, even with President Trump in the White House, who is a champion against human trafficking. I mean, I'm telling you, I fought this my whole life in this country. No president has done more. Even with him, you see now that there are those who work against him, and they find these loopholes in the system to protect their friends, and the American citizen suffers.
Yeah, it is not incidental that U.S. Attorney Damian Williams oversaw all three of these cases, the Epstein case, the Maxwell case, the Diddy case. And I think all three of these cases were thrown. In Epstein's case, the New York medical examiner, Michael Baden, one of the most respected forensic pathologists in the United States, examined Epstein's body and insists that his injuries are not consistent with him having hung himself. The American people are asked to believe that the security cameras just happened to be out of order, that the two guards who were supposed to be monitoring Epstein happened to fall asleep, that they happened to remove his cellmate the day before he allegedly killed himself. Yet we had his criminal defense lawyer, David Schoen, on this show, who said he was retained the Thursday before, and they had reached a settlement on his retention fee, which was not an insubstantial amount. So who hires an expensive lawyer on Thursday but kills themselves on Saturday? The answer is no one. You're tuned in to the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Jaco Booyens, who is one of the leaders in the country in the fight against human trafficking and sex trafficking. And we're going to continue to talk about the Diddy trial and who it may have covered up for when we get back. Whatever you do, folks, please don't touch that dial. This is the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple audio networks, and we'll be back with more.
This is the Roger Stone Show. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
We're back on the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Jaco Booyens, a recognized leader in the fight against sex trafficking. We're talking about the larger issue of human trafficking and sex trafficking in the United States, specifically trying to sort out what exactly happened at the Sean Combs trial. I just said that I thought the government purposely threw these trials. Where are the co-conspirators? Where are the indictments against others beyond just Sean Combs, beyond just Ghislaine Maxwell, beyond just Jeffrey Epstein, for that matter? These people were catering to elites whose names would be known to virtually everyone listening to this radio show. That's why I think there was a massive cover up here. Jaco, let me ask you, Democrats like California Governor Gavin Newsom and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker are talking about decriminalizing sex work. Now, as a libertarian, there was a day in which I considered prostitution a victimless crime, thought that it could be legalized if it was regulated with health checkups. I've kind of abandoned that position because I think the cartels, as it were, organized crime and other bad actors would move in, just utilize this legalization, putting women or children, boys and girls, into servitude against their will. And therefore, I've changed my view. What do you think of these proposals?
Yeah, Roger, thank you for bringing that up. It's a massive movement. It's called the Full decrim movement, and it's led by J.B. Pritzker and his brother and Gavin Newsom. Later this year, in November, there's a massive conference in Johannesburg, South Africa, where they want to lead the effort. Look, the three places where that has happened in the world all pulled it back. Child trafficking skyrocketed over 1,000%. You cannot decriminalize the sale of people. In an ideal world, under your previous statement, if it was purely consensual, you could have that argument. But do you know that 87% of all legal prostitutes that are in counties in Nevada that are legal, 87% of them have filed trafficking charges? Because all it takes, Roger, is one event where that human being says, I don't want to go into that guy's hotel room, I don't want to be with him intimately, and they're forced to do it, and now it's trafficking. So the decrim movement falls on its face from the get-go. It will be exploited, but it's gaining a lot of momentum in our country, part and parcel, because they'll even tell you, well, these crimes are so difficult to prosecute. Think about this, 20-something years of freak-off parties by Sean Combs. 20 years. They call one testimony, they charge him with human trafficking, which means there's a buyer and a seller. This is an industry of supply meets demand. Yet not in Epstein or Maxwell or Harvey Weinstein, for that matter, or Kevin Spacey or Diddy, did any of the buyers get called. No buyer is cross-examined. Nobody that bought human beings when Epstein provided them. Nobody that paid for sex with children when Epstein provided them. He's charged with trafficking. So where's the buyers? I mean, you're charging him with trafficking, so go get the buyers. The buyers are high-profile individuals in this country, and they cover for them. So 20-something years of cases, and the jury comes to a verdict in 3 days. 3 days, and the Friday before the verdict, they dropped 50% of the sex trafficking charges on the Friday. They just dropped 50% of the charges because they said, we don't think the jury can come to a verdict on these charges. No, because you intentionally, to your point, built the case so poorly that Cassie Ventura is the largest loser here, if that makes sense. She's the one that is losing because her face is out there. She's now called a liar. And I was quite surprised, actually, that some of the Hollywood elites came out, some of the women in the Me Too movement came out and said, so there's never justice for any victim.
It is a great tragedy. I want to thank our guest, Jaco Booyens, for joining us to talk about the Diddy case. And whatever you do, folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back with Congressman Eric Burlison to tell us about the tremendous importance of the big, beautiful bill.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Now, joining us is one of my favorite members of Congress, Eric Burlison, who is a rock-ribbed Reagan conservative, a bulldog champion of the taxpayers, a fighter for your Second Amendment rights, and a staunch and outspoken supporter of President Donald Trump and his reform agenda. Congressman Burlison represents the 7th District of Missouri, which includes Springfield and the surrounding areas. He served in the Missouri General Assembly prior to his election to Congress, but don't ever call him a politician. He is a man who ran for public office not to be someone, but in order to do something, and we're proud to have him on the Roger Stone Show today. Congressman, welcome.
Thank you, Roger. It's always an honor.
So you had a front row seat here for an important part of American history. From the beginning, I believe you were a staunch supporter of President Trump's big, beautiful bill. You, like many of us, expressed concern about the need to further cut federal spending, but if you understand House rules and how the House works, this really wasn't the appropriate vehicle for that. The administration has a series of rescission bills in which they're going to tackle the problem of excess spending. But it was a tumultuous, really a tenuous and exciting time. I stayed up all night into the wee hours of the morning to see if Speaker Johnson would round up the votes, and in the end, he did. So tell us what it was like to be there when you heard that the measure had passed.
It was fantastic, and look, me and several members of the Freedom Caucus were really fighting hard to get every piece of what Donald Trump wanted, and probably were more aggressive and envious than even the president when it came to being willing to give in to the moderates. Things like the SALT tax deduction increase, we fought that tooth and nail because it does have a cost, and it really doesn't benefit middle class Americans. It benefits mostly people in paying high tax states. We thought that jeopardized Trump's agenda and his ability to make many of the tax cuts better or more permanent. So we were fighting to get to do that. We were also trying to figure out how, in order to pay for these tax cuts, how can we reduce spending in other areas, especially things like the Green New Deal, which Donald Trump said he wanted entirely gone, but yet Republicans and K Street didn't want the Green New Deal gone, and so they fought us. The Senate really jammed us with some language that watered down those spending reductions. So on the day of the vote, we had meetings with the White House. We were trying to figure out how we can navigate some of the things that the Senate has sent over. But by that evening, we'd come up with a list of things that we felt that we needed to fight for and get a commitment. And by about 2 a.m., we got a commitment from the president's team. And really, at the end of the day, I don't think they had a hard problem with getting the president and his team on board. It's getting the rest of the conference on board, right? And so that once we got some of those commitments, then we were able to deliver a huge win for the president.
Yeah, many people criticize Speaker Mike Johnson. I am not among them because I think he has one of the most difficult jobs on earth. He has members of his conference like you and Anna Paulina Luna and Andy Ogles and of course many of my friends in the Freedom Caucus who want radical reform of government. And then you have those, let's call them what they are, rhinos, those moderate Republicans who don't really want to do anything other than get reelected. They want to just not rock the boat. And he has to get a majority of his caucus to vote for anything. It's an extraordinarily difficult job, and my hat's off to him for his leadership in this fight. I think he did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, I think he did too, and we, part of it was us in that fight, and recognizing we may have to give to some of the moderates on issues like raising the SALT tax, but in exchange, we were able to get them to buy into, letting us correct some of the misuse, the waste, fraud, and abuse within Medicaid and other programs, which ultimately strengthens those programs for the people that need it. Those were huge wins. And I think Johnson did a good job of trying to navigate a narrow path.
Yeah, we had a great interview with your colleague, Tim Burchett, the other day, and it was a great interview. Let's look at this the other way around for a moment, if we may. Every House Democrat voted essentially for the largest tax increase in American history, because if the Trump first-term tax cuts had not been renewed in January, the American people would have had an across-the-board 68% increase in federal income tax rates. They voted not to allow to cut the tax on tips. They voted against slashing, or I should say, they voted to slash the child tax credit. They voted to keep criminal illegal aliens here in the United States. They voted to continue to give illegals Medicaid. this is truly a party that has lost its way.
That's a really great way to put it, because the Democrats they're really salivating, thinking that they've got one over on us, that they can be able to campaign on this one big beautiful bill. But I think that, to your point, there's just as much negative for voting against the bill, and once the American people start living under this bill and the new tax benefits, and they start getting huge tax returns this coming April, I think that the following election in November, middle class taxpayers are going to be rewarding us because they will have lived under the benefits of the one big beautiful bill.
I agree with that. I think the CBO, by the way, which has a long history of being wrong, the Congressional Budget Office insisted that the Reagan tax cuts would cause a deficit, but of course, federal revenues spiked sharply, as they did after the Trump tax cuts in his first term, after they did after John F. Kennedy's tax cuts. So this continuous liberal myth and the static analysis of the CBO, which never takes economic growth into consideration, was just used as another piece of the disinformation campaign against the bill. I had members of my own family saying, how can you support something that cuts Social Security? There's nothing, not only does it not cut Social Security, but 88% of those currently receiving Social Security benefits got a tax break, will not have those benefits taxed. So that's just another example of the disinformation out there that supporters of the bill had to face down. I believe these artificial intelligence aspects of the bill, where they limited states from regulating AI, in the end, those got stripped out, did they not?
That language got stripped out by a Senate amendment. In fact, Senator Cruz, who was the sponsor of that language, decided to strip it, that it wasn't the right time, and he stripped it. He voted to strip his own language out of the one big beautiful bill. So that took a little bit of the controversy. That issue can cut both ways. But at the end of the day, we don't want to complicate a bill that's already complicated. And I think that was wise for them to take that out. And then to your point, you're absolutely right. The Democrats are going to continue to lie. They have, for example, they're setting up, staging protests at nursing homes and other places, trying to shout that people at nursing homes are going to be kicked off Medicaid, or individuals who are disabled are going to be kicked off Medicaid, and that could not be further from the truth. The only changes to Medicaid that we did that might impact an individual is a person who is an able-bodied, young age working adult, and we know that statistically there are a lot of, unfortunately, young men between the ages of 18 and 50 that are just checked out of the workforce. They don't, for whatever reason, they don't feel like they need to go work, and if they're not disabled, we should not be covering their health insurance and their food stamps and their other benefits. We need to motivate individuals to get back to work, and that's what this Trump economy needs. We need more people working the jobs, and that's how you grow an economy. And once people have one job, they might get promoted to another job, better job. That's how it works. People don't just immediately jump into management.
Yeah, the Social Security stuff really particularly sticks in my craw, because which party was it that moved the Social Security funds from a private trust to the public fund so Congress could spend it? Why, that was Lyndon Johnson of the Democrats. Which party stopped tax deductions for Social Security payments? That happened under the Democrats. Which party started the taxing of Social Security benefits? Why, that would be the Democrats. Which party started giving our Social Security money to illegal immigrants who had not paid into the Social Security Trust Fund? Why, that once again would be the Democrats. During their recent 12 years in power, 4 under Obama, 4 under Biden, there was never a Social Security increase other than the cost of living adjustment, which Joe Biden tried to take credit for, but the president who pushed and signed the legislation that ensured that Social Security payments were adjusted based on the cost of living was Richard Milhous Nixon. In 1972, he signed a bill that introduced automatic cost of living adjustments, COLAs, for Social Security benefits, which started in 1975. So the Democrats have demagogued the Social Security issue every 2 or 4 years for as long as I can remember. And it was President Donald Trump. There were technical reasons why the tax on Social Security couldn't be eliminated entirely, but they came up with a formula under which 88% of those who currently receive benefits will no longer pay taxes on them. To me, that is one of the greatest things in the bill.
It is. It's a huge benefit. And those seniors, when they realize how big of a tax benefit I think that they will understand that what the Democrats are doing is all hogwash. But to your point, we do have a shortfall that was created by the Democrats because in about 9 years, the amount of money that's going in for Social Security will not equal the amount that's going out. And as a result, some adjustments will have to be made. And the Democrats put into the bill an automatic reduction in benefits. So the Democratic Party has laid some landmines that are going to have to be addressed. And I don't think I think the Republicans are going to have to be the adults and fix it.
If you're just tuning in, folks, we're talking to Congressman Eric Burlison from Missouri. We're talking about the benefits of the big, beautiful bill and also some of the landmines that the Democrats have laid for Social Security beneficiaries in the future. We'll be right back with more of one of the most conservative and articulate champions of the taxpayers in the U.S. House of Representatives, Congressman Eric Burlison, on the other side. Whatever you do, folks, please stay with us here on The Roger Stone Show and don't touch that dial. When we come back, I want to ask the congressman whether he thinks it's time for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates on the American people. So whatever you do, don't go away.
This is The Roger Stone Show. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to The Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Congressman Eric Burlison. The congressman is a solid, rock-ribbed conservative, a strong supporter of free market policies, individual freedom, and he has focused his entire political career on reducing government regulations. He's a proud father, husband, God-fearing patriot, and he is the host of a popular podcast, Fresh Freedom. Congressman, where can people go to see your podcast?
It's on everywhere you can look: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, X, Rumble. So we try to broadcast it everywhere.
How often do you do your show?
Each week that we are in session, which is about 3 weeks a month, we will do a podcast. It's myself and a few other freshman members of Congress, and so we try to bring on a special guest. Would love to have you on it next time you're in D.C.
I would be more than honored. So it cannot be a great time to be a Democrat. Think about it. USAID has been defunded. The Dow is skyrocketing. Rogue left-wing judges' powers finally been limited by the Supreme Court. Iran's nuclear weapons development capability has been smashed. Zoran is emerging as the leader of their party, a pro-Hamas Muslim radical. The Republican National Committee has 5 times more cash on hand than the Democrat National Committee, which has to borrow to stay alive. Illegal aliens are being deported, and we just increased more funding for that. President Trump is brokering peace deals across the globe. States will soon start defunding Planned Parenthood. And white males like David Hogg are being kicked out of the Democrat Party. Can't be very exciting to be a Democrat these days, can it?
No, the wins just keep coming. But one of the ones that I would add to your list is that the Democrats' fundraising apparatus, Act Blue, is under total disarray, being criminally investigated, and so I think that the fact that I think we discovered that they were laundering money through Act Blue and attributing it to American citizens that had no idea that they were making these contributions.
To the extent of millions and millions and millions of dollars. By the way, one of the biggest recipients of this money in the country, New York Attorney General Letitia James. Going to become time to pay the piper here very soon. This is how they propped up Kamala Harris's campaign as well. Act Blue is a criminal conspiracy in which they launder millions of dollars in multiple small and medium-sized contributions in the names of people. In some cases, the people don't exist. In other cases, when you contact them, they have no idea what you're talking about. So, Congressman, you're absolutely right. That's an important development. I know the House is conducting a vigorous investigation into Act Blue. It explains why, for example, Marco Rubio's challenger, Val Demings, in the last Senate election, she raised $37 million. Marco Rubio, an incumbent, raised $10 million. Now, he beat her soundly, but how does an obscure House member who no one's really ever heard of raise $37 million on the internet, other, candidly, than by fraud? You have put your finger right on the issue.
Yeah, I think if we keep investigating, I think what we're going to find is that a lot of that money originated overseas. It was coming in from people that would otherwise not be able to contribute, so they just they use algorithms to log into Act Blue, take a spreadsheet of people that had previously donated and just enter their demographic information and attribute the contribution to those people. So it was on a large scale.
All right, I'm afraid we have to end it there. I want to thank our guest, Congressman Eric Burlison from Missouri, a staunch conservative, a great supporter of the president, giving us an eyewitness account on the passage of the most significant piece of legislation in my lifetime, President Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Roger. Anytime.
That's about it for us today. I hope you had a great 4th of July weekend. The Stone family certainly did. I think it would be inappropriate for us not to finish with an extraordinary musical interlude to end the program. And therefore, here is Kate Smith singing God Bless America.
God bless America.